A woman who's supposed to be dead appeared at her own funeral, alive and kicking. With 8 adorable children, a loving husband, and a stable job, one woman from Burundi, Africa can say that she's living the life she'd always dreamed of. Though she'd experienced a lot of problems and troubles in the past, those days were gone. Noella left Burundi, her native country, and flew all the way to Australia and found a new home and a new life. Her future was sparkling bright. She planned to spend the rest of her days with her husband, strolling on Australia's pristine beaches once her kids grow up. Gone are the days where she needed to scrape and beg for food. Her husband was a good provider, and her children were all loving and supportive. However, when she returned to her native land for a very important reason, she had no idea that everything in her life was about to change. In 2004, Noella Rukundo left her native home in Burundi to search for a brighter future in Australia. Her first husband had died and left her with 5 children. With big dreams for her kids, the widow mustered all of her courage and decided to take her luck in a foreign land. It seemed that Noella did the right thing. Soon enough, she found a new job and a nice place to settle with the help of a resettlement agency. The Australians were friendly, and she was offered all the help she could get. Her kids didn't have trouble adjusting to their new home. Noella was always thankful of the blessings in her life, especially when a big one came again. Still depending on the social worker who helped her and her family to build a new life in Australia, Noella often visited the agency. It was there where she met Balanga Kalala, a recent refugee from Congo. Since Kalala already knew how to speak English, he was often asked by the social worker to translate for Noella. At that time, she only knew Swahili. During those encounters, the two fell in love. Noella was a widow with 5 kids, and Kalala was a widower. She soon learned that he fled to Australia after a rebel army attacked and ransacked their small village in Congo. In that unfortunate incident, his wife and young son were killed. With no reason left to stay, he decided to start a new life in a foreign land as well. Noella had no plans of getting married. She wanted to dedicate her life to raising her children. However, when she met Kalala, everything had changed. He was sweet and caring, and he always made her laugh. Moreover, he completely accepted her situation. In a short period of time, Noella fell head over heels for Kalala. Needless to say, the two decided to live together. They moved into the Melbourne suburb of Kings Park. Kalala treated her children as his own. In the years that followed, she bore him 3 more children. However, she also discovered more of her second husband's personality. Noella had nothing to say to her husband when it comes to providing the needs of the family. Since he came as a refugee to Australia in 2004, he worked hard and found steady employment soon enough. He worked in a seafood processing factory first before finding a better job as a forklift operator in a warehouse. However, while living together under one roof, Noella discovered the violent side of her husband. When he was tired, he would often shout and get mad at small things. There were times when he would physically hurt her. However, after the rage, he would come to her like a tamed sheep and cry for forgiveness. As a wife and a mother, she would often disregard the incident and instead learn to accept the situation. After all, he was her husband and she loved him. Back in Burundi, Noella was raised by her stepmother. Although she was thousands of miles away from her home, she makes it a point to send her regards to all her relatives in Africa. Thanks to technology, she was always updated on what's happening back there. However, one day the news that arrived from home were not good ones. Her stepmother had sadly succumbed to her sickness. Of course, she needed to go home to Burundi to pay her last respect. Unfortunately, her husband couldn't accompany her due to his work responsibilities. From Melbourne, Australia, Noella traveled 7,500 miles to reach Burundi. She needed to get some things done and, of course, to attend the funeral. It would be the last time she would see the amazing woman who raised her. Her husband, Kalala, kept on checking on her through phone calls. Since her home in Burundi was small, Noella decided to check into a hotel in Bujumbura. She was feeling stressed, sad, and exhausted, and missed her husband and children as well. After the funeral service, she went back to her hotel room to get some rest. Just in time, her phone rang. The call was from her husband. She answered it right away and instantly detected the sound of concern on Kalala's voice. She was feeling so lonely, and his call was one of the things she needed. According to her husband, he was trying to get to her the whole day. He asked how she's doing, and she replied she was going to go to bed to get some rest from the hard day she had. Instead of saying goodnight, Kalala advised her to take a dose of fresh air outside. Noella felt that he was so worried about her, so she decided to follow his suggestion. She had no idea that it was the beginning of something she never thought could happen to her. Noella was only a few steps out of the hotel compound when she noticed a man approaching her. With so little time to react, she just realized that a gun was pointed at her. The stranger told her something that kept her from screaming. He said, "Don't scream. If you start screaming, I will shoot you. They're going to catch me, but you'll already be dead." Although she felt that her heart would burst in fear, she decided that it would be wiser to do as she'd been told. The assaulter motioned Noella towards a car parked on the side of the road. There were 3 guys. One was the driver, and the other 2 were holding guns. Trying to appear as calm as she could, she was forced to sit between 2 men. Before the car went, she was blindfolded. According to her speculation, the car ran for 40 minutes. No one was speaking while they were traveling. When the car stopped, she was shoved outside and pushed inside an empty building. Noella was then tied to a chair. Still holding her tongue, Noella heard one of the kidnappers make a call to alert the boss. Then they turned to her and asked her absurd questions. The questions were direct. "What did you do to this man? Why has this man asked us to kill you?" For Noella, nothing made sense. She only answered, "Which man?" She couldn't remember anyone whom she'd had trouble with. As far as she knows, she didn't have any problems with anybody. However, when the man answered her question, it felt like he dropped a bomb. The kidnapper's answer was firm. He said, "Your husband." Without a doubt, she screamed that it was impossible. Kalala would never do that. She even accused them of lying. And then she was slapped. The leader of the group told her how stupid she was. To further prove his point, he called the man who had paid them to kill her. Noella's mind was spinning all along. She could only wish it wasn't real. It wasn't happening. When the call was connected, the leader of the kidnappers triumphantly announced that they had already held Noella as captive. The phone was put on a loudspeaker so that she could hear the man on the other line. Then the truth stabbed her like a knife. "Kill her," the same voice that consoled her an hour earlier sounded like hell to her ears. The man whom she'd given 11 years of her life, the same man who was the father of her children, she never thought he'd be able to condemn her to death. When the kidnappers discussed how they would kill her and dispose of the body, it already tasted like death. She passed out. As the leader of the kidnappers ended the call, Noella was coming round. She knew that her situation's hopeless and nothing can save her anymore. As she was preparing her mind to accept her unfortunate fate, she noticed the kidnappers looking at her intently. "We're not going to kill you. We don't kill women and children." Upon hearing this, a little surge of hope rose. The switch was mind-boggling. She didn't even know how to react. Then the leader asked her why she hadn't noticed in the past that something was wrong. It was January, and the order to kill her was planned in November of last year. Noella tried to remember what she'd done to her loving husband. Try as she might, she couldn't remember anything, nor did she sense that it would go as far as this. Noella's life might be in danger. However, she couldn't believe that there was hope after all. The hired assassins Kalala paid were men of principles. They did not believe in killing women and children. In that moment, she realized that God, indeed, loves her after all. Noella spent the next 2 days in the abandoned building. During this time, the kidnappers told her husband that she was already dead. They also took the opportunity to extort more money from Kalala. Her husband willingly shipped the money. Back in the hotel where she stayed, Noella's brother was fearful of her disappearance. She never told him when she would fly back home to Melbourne. Moreover, her things were still in her room. Suspecting that something bad had happened to her, the brother reached out to Kalala. According to her brother, he asked Kalala for $545 to pay the police to open an investigation. The husband instantly wired the money and even expressed how bothered he is. However, his shows were not close to being over. After 2 days of being held captive, the assassins finally told her what she was praying to hear. The gang leader, however, had a piece of advice and warning for her. He said she was extremely lucky that they are murderers with principles, but not everyone is the same. According to him, Kalala is very serious. He wants her dead. They do not even know if there are other killers on whom her husband had orders to murder her. Noella was given 80 hours to leave the country. Before leaving her on the side of the road, the leader handed her a memory card. It was a piece of evidence that contains all the recorded phone calls. They even provided the receipts for the Western Union money transfer. However, Noella wouldn't forget the last words she heard from the kidnappers. He told her, We just want you to go back to tell other stupid women like you what happened. You must learn something. You people get a chance to go overseas for a better life. But the money you are earning, the money the government gives you, you use it for killing each other." In the middle of the night, Noella realized she had very little time to lose. Right away, she called the pastor of her church, Desano Haruna Nongoma, back in Melbourne. The pastor was shocked to hear her voice due to the pretense created by Kalala. When Noella told her about her husband's evil plan, even the pastor had a hard time believing her. In the end, however, the pastor was convinced to help. Noella pleaded not to tell anyone that she's still alive. For her, she was given a new life to straighten things out. She wouldn't miss it for the world to see the reaction of her dear husband. Back in their family home in Melbourne, Australia, Kalala appeared like a grieving widower. Days ago, when he received the assassin's call that they had already killed Noella, he had sadly informed the community that she died in a tragic accident in Burundi. Kalala spent the day mourning with well-wishers. Many of those who came to offer their support and compassion donated money. He looked like a devastated husband who had lost someone so dear to him. However, it seemed that it's not as easy as he planned it to be. On February 22, 2015, Noella had returned safely to Melbourne. More careful and vigilant than ever, she got news of the fake funeral her husband had cunningly organized. Of course, it's an honor to be able to attend her funeral, alive. It was around 7:30 p.m. when Noella, while sitting on a parked car just in front of their home, noticed that her husband was escorting the last group of well-wishers into their cars. As they drove away, she decided that it was the perfect time to present her surprise. When Kalala was left alone on the porch, Noella slowly made her entrance. Even in the dark, she saw her husband's reaction upon seeing her. His mouth was open wide, and a look of fear was beginning to show. She walked closer, not speaking a word. Her husband kept on talking to himself. It was like he was seeing a ghost. When they were inches apart, Kalala touched her shoulders. Then he jumped. When he reached out to touch her again, it was then that he realized she was not an apparition. Kalala then started to scream, asking for forgiveness. In the past, Noella had always forgiven Kalala for hurting her physically. She even believed him when he said that his violence was just a result of the trauma he got from his native land. She loved him dearly, and she was always willing to accept him. But this time, he'd reached the limit. He even went beyond that. Noella called the police she had contacted beforehand. They ordered Kalala off the premises. A few days later, she obtained a court order against him. To make her case strong, she followed the policeman's order to call her husband. It was then that he made a full confession. Without his knowledge, the murder confession was being recorded on tape. According to Kalala, he loved her so much and was suspecting that she would later leave him for another man. He said that the evil deed was planned out of jealousy. But no matter how much he tried, Noella's heart and mind were already closed. She had learned her lesson the hard way. Noella pursued a case against him. With all the pieces of evidence she had, she knew that she would get the justice she deserved. When Kalala was brought in for questioning, he denied his involvement in the murder plan. How could he? When Kalala was brought in for official questioning, he tried for hours to deny that he was the mastermind. He told the police that he was incapable of such a thing. However, when the police played the recordings of his voice as he was confessing to the plot and the reasons why he paid hired killers to murder his wife, he realized he had nowhere to go. Kalala started to cry. Noella, as well as the police, were still unable to find the real reason why Kalala resorted to that evil thing. All he could ever say is that sometimes the devil can come into someone to do something, but after they do it, they start thinking, why did I do that thing? On December 11th of the same year, the Court of Melbourne sentenced Kalala to 9 years in prison. He pleaded guilty to the incitement of murder, and that evidently lessened the punishment given to him. Even when he was put behind bars, Noella wasn't able to get her life normal again. When she was lying alone at night, she kept on hearing her husband's voice. Kill her. She knows it will take a long time to heal, or perhaps it will never happen at all. Despite the admission of Kalala, there were some people in the Melbourne African community that ostracized for her husband's convictions. Some of them who have known Kalala for so long believe that he's not capable of such a thing. Although Noella sees that the future would be difficult for her and her 8 children, she doesn't regret her decision to leave him put behind bars. He'd committed an unforgettable sin, and her trust and love for him were gone completely. She might be devastated as a wife, but she ensures that she'll take care of her 8 children for as long as she lives. After everything that happened, she knows that she needs to be stronger than ever. When asked about the people who blamed her, Noella held her head up high and said, "My situation, my past life, that's gone. I'm starting a new life now."